Discusses a series of social, cultural, economical, or political issues that the journalists from the University of Illinois chose to highlight during their stay in Romania. They have reported on a variety of things like tourism in Romania, education, healthcare, agriculture, and of course Romania's wine industry. Details that concern stray dogs, traffic rules, flower shops, and even casinos offer an integrative picture of how a group of foreign correspondents perceives Romanian life. What brought you to this project, and does Romania, as an emerging European country, represent a good place for young journalists to practice their skill?
I think it does represent a good place because I think there are lots of issues in Romania that maybe a lot of other countries are also dealing with, but perhaps could be more profound here. And I think it was eye-opening for the students in that sense, to see the reconstruction of the city, knowing its history, of Bucharest, knowing the history of the country, where it's coming from, help them kind of understand the transition that's still underway, really, economically at least. And I would venture perhaps politically, because it seems I hear a lot of people saying that they think that things should be further along than they are politically. So I think it's been a good place for the students to visit because people here are very friendly, they're very open, they're very accessible, they're very willing to share their views. We were able to talk to experts and everyday people on the streets about a lot of these issues, and they were very open and warm and friendly. So I think the students had a very good feeling about Romania. I was saying they didn't really want to leave. When it came time to move on to go to Rome, Italy, to talk to Romanians living there about life outside Romania, they were very reluctant to leave because they had just really fallen in love with the country. So it was clear they felt that Romania was a very interesting place to visit and that the people here were people that they really connected with.
Oh, that's good to know. And how do you evaluate the impact of their descriptions in the American community?
We had a showing when we got back and they completed their projects. We had a showing and we invited a lot of people to come and watch the showing. A lot of people who would help prepare the students because they spent 16 weeks during the semester learning about Romania, learning about its history, learning about the transitions that it's undergoing, learning about how it had recently become part of the EU and what that meant. And so we wanted to showcase, what the students had done with that information and invited a lot of the people who helped develop their background on Romania. And they thoroughly enjoyed the program, and we broadcast it to the whole community of Champaign-Urbana. And lots of people have talked about how much they enjoyed the show.
I've noticed that the journalists took a great interest on tourism and how Romania is likely to develop a certain brand image by focusing either on imposing castle or the high-quality wine industry. In your opinion, what attributes should be brought to the public's attention in order to optimize Romania's image and to increase tourism in our country?
Wow, I don't know that I'm an expert on that, on how to increase tourism. I can say, as a tourist, some of the things that might give people pause, the sense that, they're not always clear what are the rules here. When you get into a taxi, the fare can be anywhere from 20 lira to 200 lira, and so you never know, what am I going to pay this time? So I think there are some ways in which tourists could be made more comfortable if they felt like they knew the rules, that there were some rules, that there was a way that they could find out, how do I complain about this? Was I just, taken by this cab driver? Is there some recourse, some way that I can report this as a kind of activity that shouldn't be supported by the government? So I think there's that question. Tourists aren't always sure, at least that was our experience, what to expect, and we're feeling a little bit on guard, sort of like defensive about, okay, I better tell this cab driver, I know how much it costs to go from here to here, don't you try to rip me off. So I think there is this kind of perception that everywhere you turn, someone's trying to get something from you, and that might be discouraging to some people. My students saw it as a challenge. So I think they started to feel like, okay, this is a country that likes to bargain, and so I'm going to get into the game and play it as best I can. I think they visited Brasov, and they saw some of the main tourism places that are promoted to the rest of the world. And they were very impressed with those. So I think when people come, that it does meet their expectations. They really enjoyed their time here. They liked the mix of spending some time in rural areas as well as in big cities to see how lifestyles might differ, and that they feel it's a country that has a lot of, beautiful landscape as well. So there were lots of things about Romania that they really felt were tourist attributes. I think the downside is just this kind of sense that we're not really sure we're protected here.
Actually, indeed, most Romanians would feel pride when seeing the pictures chosen to reflect our cultural patrimony revealing Romania. However, there was no hesitation when it came to criticizing some of our low points, especially when talking about stray dogs, streets, or chaotic urban development. It is clearly a critical moment in the history of our country that struggles to detach itself from the effects of communism and to become a pure reflection of democratic society. How do you evaluate Romania's progress so far, and how long do you think it will take until Romania will reach the standards of a modern democratic society?
I'm not sure I'm an expert on this topic because I can't say that I know enough about the inner workings of Romania to sort of gauge where the country is in this process or what it needs to get to whatever the goal is at the end. I only can tell you what I hear from people I talk to, cab drivers, hotel operators, people I encounter in various places who feel a little bit frustrated and somewhat cynical about the political situation, feeling that they're not very well represented by the politicians. And not by they're not referring to any particular party, they're just talking about politicians in general. That they're feeling frustrated, that they're not making better progress at bringing the country forward, that they're too involved in their own special interests and not so much focused on the interests of all Romanian people.
Here at Radio Iași, we focus very much on tradition and how it is preserved, especially in the rural environment. Even though many cultural aspects have been discussed in revealing Romania, most of them concern the reflection of the urban lifestyle, the significance of people holding hands at the gay issue parade, or why people carry flowers upside down. We saw no stories related to our songs, customs, or holidays. What brought you to this decision, or the journalists in case, and why did they emphasize so much on such cultural aspects?
Each student was allowed to choose their own topic, whatever interested them when we were doing our research. So part of that was based just on decisions that they made from the research that they had been doing before they even arrived here. They had to have some sense of what their topic would be. So based a lot on what they were reading about the country, the things that they were hearing about the country, they were developing a proposal of a topic that they were interested in. So, with 10 students, you can't cover every single topic. So and each topic had to be slightly different so that we had a range of things. And some were, by my declaration, I wanted various aspects of life represented. So I felt that the cultural elements were kind of woven into some of the stories, even though they weren't done as a standalone story.
Another interesting subject was focused on the Romanian media market. How do you evaluate the development of the media market, the ethics implied in the journalistic process, and the sustainability of the democratic process in Romania right now?
These are some tough questions because I don't consider myself an expert on Romania. So I can only tell you based on what I'm hearing from journalists who either left the country or who might still be here working in media. Again, that there's a certain kind of frustration because they feel the system that exists here, which is not unique to Romania, doesn't really favor fact-based reporting, that a lot of influences are determining how stories get shaped, what stories get written. And again, this is happening in a lot of countries. It's not unique to Romania, so I'm not sure that it represents anything particular about Romania. And in terms of the democratic process, I think what is key to a democratic process that's successful is a vibrant press that cares about stories that really reflect the interests of the people who are engaged in that process or should be engaged, and working toward trying to engage them in some way. So, and I think this is one of the questions we need to ask ourselves in the US as well, where people are becoming much more cynical about politics. Maybe it's the way we're framing politics as a media. And maybe we need to rethink how we are reporting the stories about politics so that we can change. If you start telling people all the time that these politicians are not accomplishing anything, that they're fighting all the time, that there's disagreement, that there's not a sense of collaboration working toward some kind of benefit to the public, then why should they care about politics? So it may be partly how we are framing our stories that's leading or encouraging this kind of cynicism that creates this population of people who start to care less and less because they feel less and less powerful in changing things.
You are now in Romania to lecture about the future of radio stations in new media era. Many media specialists sustain that soon enough all the individual media channels will disappear along with the fascinating development of the internet that manages to incorporate all of them. What is your position regarding this statement?
I don't know that I would agree with that. I think when television came along, everybody predicted radio was dead, that we weren't going to see radio anymore, and radio is still thriving. So people will still listen to the radio. There's still a purpose for having a radio station. Not everything that you put on the internet is exactly the programming that you have on your radio station. There are ways to interact with people on the radio that are more immediate than what you can do on the internet that I think also gives people a sense that they're more involved. So I think, you know, for example, talk shows where the public is invited to make comments and to talk about and discuss an issue is a really valuable format because it engages people right at that moment and everyone else who's listening is benefiting from that conversation. So I think that has value rather than going to an internet site, a website, where comments are posted and you're not exactly interacting in that moment in time with people.
During the past years, radio stations across the globe found their place on the internet pages, so while still transmitting on their usual radio frequencies. In this way, the radio voices are correlated with the texts, photos, or films. How do you comment on these transformations? Do you think that the classical radio format, as we know it, will disappear as it dives deeper in the new media expansion?
What I see new media doing for radio is adding value to what radio is already doing. I think the website of a radio station is a place where perhaps you're using a clip of an interview on your radio station and you can post the whole interview for people to hear. It's a part of making your process of news gathering more transparent, where you can share with people, look, this is the whole interview. You can see for yourself. We didn't edit this in a way that made this person say this in a certain way. That's how they said it in the interview that we did. You can hear for yourself. It's a place where you can put stories that maybe you don't have time for in your newscast, but you still think are important to people. It's a place where your audience can share comments, where they can give you input on stories they think you should be covering. It's a way for you to share breaking news with your audience, with Twitter feeds. A Facebook page might be a way where you can, again, engage your audience in a different way, in a more casual way, to try and find out what's important to them. So I see websites not replacing radio, but adding value to an existing radio station. And I think if the radio programming is creative, it's interesting, it will always attract an audience. And the website can be a place where people can get additional information.
Indeed, those would be some advantages, but do you consider any threats regarding this subject of the expansion of new media?
I would say the only threat is that younger people, at least in the US and maybe not so much yet in Romania, or maybe in the urban centers of Romania, have a way to access information that can bypass the radio stations and the TV stations, that they're looking more for an on-demand way of getting information. So they would prefer a podcast over listening to the newscast because then they can listen to it when they want to at their convenience. So I would say the biggest threat is for radio and television to figure out how to accommodate that and still remain in business. So maybe they change the way they provide programming. So maybe instead of having this linear format where one show follows another on a TV, you have a different way of accessing information. Maybe you choose from a menu of programs that are offered at a specific time, so that the station can remain more lively and more interesting to the person viewing it, but also give them a sense of having a power over what they watch and when they see it.
Thank you very much for your time.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.